We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H.
People talking.
This is AV Rant.
They know I'm in here.
It's your home theater and AV questions answered, starting as smooth as butter.
This is a well-oiled machine.
Oh,
After 713 episodes, we've got this on lock.
Yes, we do. Many thanks to YouTube for changing even more settings behind the scenes where not only, a couple weeks ago, I noticed that, our defaults got changed without asking us and inserting more ads. Well, not only that, but they went back and put mid-roll ads in and every kind of ad into every video we ever made. So that was a fun, 20 minutes batch editing 50 videos at a time to take all that out. Thanks, YouTube. Appreciate it. Love ya. That was really nice. Air conditioning is a good thing, though. It got hot over here.
Yeah. All right. It's late.
Yes.
It's in the evening.
It is.
So it's not that late, though. So my family is all still up and puttering around out there talking to each other. Yeah. So if you hear stuff in the background, it's that muffled noise is not somebody I have in a box in the corner anymore.
Very little gets picked up on your microphone besides your voice. So
I know it's very forgiving in here. I'm glad I don't have one of those dynamic mics. This the compressor mics are just so much more like if you're not right on them, you can't hear anything at all, which means you have to stay on them. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's pretty nice. All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Say it slow. Question@avrant.com. That's the way to get your question on the podcast and answered in general.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you contact us any other way, you may or may not get a response.
No guarantees.
And if you are sending it at tom@avrant.com, I still have not migrated my mail over to my new computer. So I reckon there's somewhere in the vicinity of 5,000 to 7,500 emails waiting for me over there. And if you think I'm reading yours, you have lost your dang mind.
Man, what if people sent you Amazon cards or something? Missing out.
I'm sorry.
Missing out on them emails.
Yeah, I am. And you know what? You're right, Rob. I have been, it's been my shame. I look at that computer and I think to myself, there's no excuse for this, Tom. You should just do it. I have tabs open on my desktop that tell me how to do it, or I'm supposed to tell me how to do it. And every time I read them, I think, this is never going to work. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole because I can't get 2 uninterrupted hours to myself right now between the kids, being at home constantly and then school starting up in a week and the ongoing renovation issues we're having.
2-day job, Tom. 2-day job.
It was a 2-day job. Well, it was. For the actual bathroom was about 2 days to fix the pipe. That is what he said was true. They weren't 2 continuous days, and they weren't 8 hours in 2 different days. It was 4 hours here, a couple hours there, and some others. So yeah, it did spiral slightly out of control, but
a little bit.
I have been told that I may be completely without a kitchen for up to 8 weeks, starting in about a week and a half.
Okay.
So migrating my mail seems it takes a small back seat to the fact that I may be homeless. Or even worse, I have to move into your home, and that's only slightly terrifying. So if you just insist on not emailing us at question@avrant.com, you can go to the website, avrant.com. Leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant, where leaving a comment is impossible. And then contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm tom@avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to talk about. I just want to talk about the house. Can we just do that for the next hour, and then we don't have that many questions. I'm sure we got through like all of them, right? Last time, didn't we get through all of them?
We've got 15 questions on the list and quite a bit of news and comments. So
jeez,
I get it. You can sprinkle it in here.
How can it not just be all about me, Rob? It's supposed to be all about me. It's my podcast.
It is AVRant _Tom. I mean, the website isn't, but your Twitter is.
Right, that's true. There's also AVRant _Dina, but I don't think she's ever used it.
Yeah. Good luck with that one.
Right. All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you do that is going to avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link on the right side of the page, and leave us a PayPal donation. So we want to thank Joseph for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Indeed, Joseph. Thank you so much for that PayPal donation. We appreciate it.
We also want to thank our 122 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can sign up to be a subscriber to your content creator of choice. Subscription means that once a month they take money from you and give it to your content creator peoples. So we want to thank our 122 patrons that are doing that right now.
For sure, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to come on over and sign yourself up for a voluntary subscription, there's no minimum, there's no maximum. Choose whatever amount you want and send it to us every month automatically. Thanks.
Thank you. If you can't support us financially, we understand. Just tell us what you've done to support us or what you're going to do to support us, and we will mention you here. So Jay wrote in, heard me say that I'm a horror movie fan, which I am, and wanted to recommend Invisible Man, which I have not seen unless you're talking about the one with Kevin Bacon, in which case I've seen it quite a few times.
No, pretty sure he means the more recent one.
I am looking forward to it. The Hunt, which I am not as much looking forward to based on reviews, but I will probably watch it no matter what. And the Japanese horror film Tag, which I have already seen and liked all the way up until the end, at which point I did not like it anymore.
One of those.
But it was good up until that point.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jay, thank you for thinking of us and sending in some thoughtful tips.
Yes, I am. What did I watch recently? I don't know. I've got my like Google News feed is constantly giving me best horror films on Netflix, best horror films on. I've seen them all. I've seen almost all of them, and then not very few of them are the best. Anyways, a Tag, if you're interested, for those of you that are wanting to see it, it is pretty good. I liked it, like I said, up until the end. And then that's on Amazon Prime Video. We got some notes of gratitude as well from Chris and Terry for keeping the podcast going and wearing our masks outside so that we can continue to keep this podcast going. So you're welcome, Terry, and you're welcome, Chris.
Indeed, Chris and Terry, thank you very much. Always nice to get those notes. It is encouraging. And I look like Master Plo Koon when I'm out there amongst the peoples now. I've got the full
Master Plo Koon
from Clone Wars.
I feel like I shouldn't.
He's that alien who's got the really dark eyes because I'm pretty much always have sunglasses on, and then he's got the full respirator because he can't breathe in normal atmosphere that all the other human-looking characters can in Star Wars. So that's what I look like when I'm out and about, and I don't really care that people can't understand what I'm saying because you know what? You wear a mask, and I won't have to wear this thing.
I went on a bike ride with a friend of mine this weekend, the second time, so the first time we went on I don't remember, some sort of thing, but this time we made a plan, and he has like a 25-mile route that he does that goes from his house out to the beach, along the beach for a ways, and then back to his house. And so I dropped my bike over there the night before, and then the morning I got there real early because it's Florida and it's miserably hot, so you got to get out there early. So we went out for this bike ride, and I consciously decided, okay, I've bought these sports masks from Etsy, and they're not the respirator types. They have a pocket for a thing, but I don't ever put anything in there. All I'm trying to do is keep droplets on me and not on you. That's what I'm trying to do. So my thing is that my kids have been wearing them while they're doing all their sports, and I wear them when I climb.
Okay.
So the kids my two boys who were on the pole vaulting team, which has been shut down because of a COVID outbreak, they were wearing them, but they were the only ones on the team wearing masks. Nobody else was wearing masks because you can't exercise and wear masks, according to
that is
somebody.
Completely not true.
Somebody said that. I don't know who it was. So and then of course all of us, including my wife and my 11-year-old son, all wear them when we climb. So I'm thinking, well, that's more of a burst of energy type of thing, and maybe you can hold your breath through it, and maybe you don't need that much oxygen. So I went on this 25-mile bike ride, and I wore a mask the entire time. Yeah, I mean, and I posted on Facebook, and I had a couple of my more seasoned people say you're young, and that's why it didn't bother you. I'm like, I'm 48. I'm going to be 49 in October. I'm not young.
Hate to break it to you, Tom,
I don't know.
This isn't really an issue or question in any other country in the world.
I know. I understand this. So, I purposely did it, and people are like, why would you even do that? That's stupid. You could have hurt yourself. I'm like, first of all, shut up. And second of all, if I'm going to have my kids wear masks, I got to at least know what it feels like.
Sure.
Right? I mean, I got to at least know. And not only that, but I got to put it under a more extreme condition, because this was a 25-mile ride, and we weren't like so I always say you buy the bike but you earn the spandex.
Okay.
I have not earned the spandex yet, and I might not even earn the special shoes that click in. I mean, it's just got regular shoes, regular clothes, but we were not going slow, and we didn't we took like one break, and it was maybe for 3 minutes just to open the backpack, get some Gatorade out, drink it, and that was it. So, I felt like that was a good amount of it, and I am still sore 2 days later, so I feel like I got some exercise.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't from the breathing. So that's what we're doing over here at AVRant to keep you guys safe.
Indeed.
I guess. And keep you in podcasts, at least. So let's go to the news here. Rob went on a tear across Twitter last week. Just Twitter was just all tore up after Rob got there.
It was me.
Don't worry about the USPS. Here comes Rob. So anyways, he went on a tear because misinformation about the new TCL 6 series, the R635, is leading gamers astray, even after we warned everyone last episode. You see, if you listen to this podcast, you wouldn't be one of the ignorant masses out there. Sheeple, get on board.
How did our massive reach not extend to everyone?
I know. How were we not like featured on Fox News after breaking this? So anyways, it's worth repeating. The new TCL 6 series might be a great value with its mini LED backlight and quantum dots, but it cannot do 4K 120, so it is not ready for PlayStation 5. It is not the case that savvy PS5 and Xbox Series X buyers should look no further, as T3 put it. Who's T3?
It's they used to be a magazine, now they're a website. They're a technology website.
T3. So if you want 120 hertz, it is limited to 440p, 1440p or lower. 440p would have been really low. 1440p or lower. Rob's tweet storm even got David Katzenmeier over at CNET to confirm things with TCL and amend his article. So if you know any gamers who are excited about these TCL 6 Series TVs, thinking they're the cheapest option for 4K 120 gaming, give them a heads up. Did he link back to AVRant?
No,
he did that?
No, didn't link back to AVRant. He tweeted.
What?
He tweeted back to me directly and was like, "Oh, hey, good call, confirmed with them."
You could tell David Katzenmeier that he owes us, and by us I mean you, and in extension me and the podcast.
Would be helpful.
I'm not asking for a byline here. I'm just asking for a link back to AVRant saying thanks for the heads up. Thanks to to Rob H over at AVRant Podcast, the best podcast and AV podcast in the world.
That's all. That's all we want.
That's all we want. For curing me of my ignorance. I am shamed, sir. I am shamed. Thank you, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in a side note, Rob also corrected all the grammar in this article, so in case you're wondering.
That's not true.
That's not true. JVC announced that their new big projector upgrade that will be shown during this year's online-only version of CDO will be a firmware update.
Yep. That's what it was last year.
Oh, whatever. So no new projector models yet. The new firmware will be free for all existing NX5, NX7, and NX9 owners. More details will be shared at CEDIA, but for now, the only hint is that they are further improving the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping for HDR and offering more customization. So That's
Yep.
probably not
That
bad.
is all they have shared so far. So last year, the big firmware update added the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. Didn't have it when it first came out almost 2 years ago now. So that was a big deal. So, I mean, this will just be a refinement. It's they haven't mentioned anything about adding an outright new feature, but they did talk about more customization. They dropped that little nugget. So in any case, we were speculating previously, saying we're not really sure if we should expect new JVC projector models this year or next year. Yeah, not this year. The upgrade is a firmware update again.
I'm just going to tell you, man, those guys over at JVC that are on the firmware group, they got it made in the shade, man. Once a year, they put out something at CDN, and they're like, we're done. Going to the Bahamas. See you guys later.
It's a good press release.
There you go. It's very exciting. Everybody's very excited. You guys nailed it. This comes from Carl. AMC Theaters has announced their plans to reopen. While they will follow national, state, and local guidelines as of now, which means in Florida, it's a free-for-all.
Some places. I didn't actually look up the Florida theaters.
You're supposed to wear masks. I mean, I don't know.
Well, that's everywhere.
I don't know if it's county by county, but yeah, there's here they're getting pretty serious about it. They're almost starting to take it serious in Florida here. It's getting real close. I still see people wear masks on the way in and then immediately take them off and hold them in their hand as they're walking around the store afterwards. Doesn't happen very often anymore, but it's happened in the last week. So let me see. As of now, approximately 400 of their 630 locations are set to reopen between August 20th, which is like a couple days from now, and September 3rd, just in time for Tenet, that movie that nobody's going to understand, and The New Mutants. So their Welcome Back to the Movies page lists their new safety and distancing protocols, including masks being mandatory for all staff and guests, unless you're eating or drinking, because somehow that's okay.
Yeah.
Only 30% of seats will be open, but to try and fill all of them, AMC is offering 15-cent tickets on opening day, a throwback to what a ticket would cost in 1920 when the first AMC theater opened in Kansas City, Missouri. How many people died after going to that one? That's the real question.
Yeah, I can't say I'm a huge fan of all of this. I think this is far too early. August 20th is, 2 days from when we're recording this. By the time you listen to this in the audio-only format, many theaters will apparently have reopened.
Be open.
Supposedly.
Well, okay. So yes. I mean, they make most of their money not from ticket sales, but from concession sales. We've been saying that for decades now. That's not new information. So restaurants, you're free to go in, and then as soon as you sit down at the table, you're allowed to take your mask off, right? And people sit there for the entire meal with their masks off, and then they put them back on when they stand up. That's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. Now, we went out to lunch today for the first. I mean, I haven't been out to eat in any way, shape, or form since we did that one trip over to Palm Beach. And we were at a place in St. Pete called Red Mesa Mercado, which is Red Mesa is like a local chain. There's like 3 of them, but each one of them, it's not like the same restaurant 3 times. Each one's different. One's like a fancy sit-down place. One's more like an al fresco dining. And this place is like burritos only. And it's all outdoor seating. I didn't have anybody, there's no servers or anything. I didn't have anybody within like 20 feet of me the entire time we were there. Like, it was the most comfortable, and it was outdoor, everything open, most comfortable eating thing I've even seen outside for quite some time. I still wore my mask every time I wasn't putting food in my mouth. So, it's what it is. I know not me, but if you're going to be in a movie theater, I guess I don't want to say defense, but movie theaters are massive rooms, and if you think of the concept of entropy, whatever water droplets are going to go out there, but we should have much more air to dissipate into, in theory. I don't think that's the way it works in actuality. The reality is, the minute you turn those lights off, the masks are coming off, and nobody's putting them back on again.
Most definitely.
That's the real problem here. It's not that they should still be able to sell food or whatever. I understand that, but no one's going to follow the rules, and nobody is going to enforce them, because to enforce them would be people going up and down the halls with flashlights.
That's right.
And that's not going to happen. So after last week's report that Disney won't release any more catalog titles on Ultra HD Blu-ray, a Disney spokesperson told Forbes, "There are no plans to discontinue releases in a particular format. We evaluate each release on a case-by-case basis and say no to Ultra HD every single time."
Yes, my joke was borrowed from The Simpsons, where I was like, the response is, well, a certain percentage will still be released on Ultra HD Blu-ray. What percentage is that? 0. 0 is a percent.
0. 0 is a percent. That is the percent of which we will be releasing them. It's very exciting. That's fine. I think that I think they're just Disney. They're all in on Disney Plus, which
absolutely
I am excited about, because my wife was not. She was upset with me for getting Disney Plus without asking me first. And since Hamilton came on Disney Plus, we have gotten our money's worth for the year. It's been nonstop Hamilton streaming in this house. Everybody can sing the songs, even the people that don't want to. So, but the fact that they're moving towards this, if you guys remember back in the day, the Disney Vault was a thing.
Yes.
Does everybody remember the Disney Vault?
And the guy who was largely responsible for that is now the CEO. So,
right.
The former CEO, Bob Iger, he has departed now. And I mean, he was the one who, when Disney Plus was coming out, was saying, hey, once something is on Disney Plus, we're never going to take it off. Disney Plus. Right. Once it's on there for good. Well, new CEO now, the guy who was largely responsible for the Disney Vault. I wonder if that policy might change at some point.
We'll see. But, the Disney Vault, for those who don't remember, what they would do is they would open the vault and they would re-release a movie that hadn't been, you couldn't even buy it. It was sort of like this planned, supply and demand thing, where they would just limit the supply. And once it was gone until the next time they decided to open the vault for that one thing, which was great for as far as marketing and stuff like that. And
that was the idea.
Sales, because you knew you were going to sell out. But I like the fact that they're pushing, at least hopefully, if they continue this way. I like the fact that they're doing this, because that means that Disney Plus is not going to go away, and it's not going to be something that I have to worry about disappearing. They have the money and the time and the back catalog, and the movies coming up certainly keep this thing relevant. So I'm excited about it, honestly.
Yeah.
Some comments here from some listeners. Mario's a member of the code-making panel for the National Electric Code. Okay, wow. Rob, you said something. And is also in charge of the grounding standards for a major U.S. wireless carrier. He has heard us discuss surge protectors and lightning strikes many times. He always thinks to himself how he ought to write in, so now he has. Dude, correct us.
Yes, please.
Because we are not electricians. Well, the number one thing that he wants to stress to everyone is that your most important method of protection is correct and proper grounding of every system that enters your house. And the part of the grounding system that often goes wrong is that all systems should have a bonded ground, meaning that your electrical panel, telephone wires, cable, antenna, satellite dish, or any other systems that could conduct an electrical signal into your house should all share the same grounding point. This is actually required as part of the National Electric Code, but it is common to find it ignored in many installations. So that is the number one thing that Mario wants everybody to check, and he shared a simplified document to show and explain what he means. So I guess there's a thing.
Yes, we will have a link at avrant.com and in the show notes for this episode where, you can just grab that off of a Google Docs folder and read through what he has written up about bonded grounding of all electrical systems entering your house. Yeah. Very, very good. Happy to have that info.
So basically, the gist of it is the grounding cable goes into from your AC service, meter thingy or whatever, goes through this like big copper, like it looks like a hair pin, hair clip thing, right? And there's different screws in it, and you can screw in a bunch of different wires. Well, where do these wires come from? Your telephone, your cable, your satellite, anything else. It all goes into there, so that it all ends up being grounded. Whatever, at least from what this picture looks like here.
That's right. Yeah.
So they're all grounded together. Now, if you have had an electrical panel replaced, or if you've had
an addition,
addition, anything like that, and you had a certified, electrician in your house, they should have done this. I know that because I'm looking at this picture. I'm like, I have that outside my house now.
Okay.
I didn't before the insurance company said that. Oh, we don't insure that panel anymore. You have to get a new panel. I was like, what? it was fine last year. They're like, this year it's not. So I had to pay a couple $100 to have somebody come out and rewire everything and hook up this new panel. And it's now has this. So hopefully if you've paid a good person, they would have done this. So to be clear, he still recommends having surge protectors for your outlets, but they should be your last line of defense, not your first. Or as we have often said about room correction programs, they are the cherry on top, not the ice cream. So if everything is wired, is grounded correctly, you should, you're mostly in good, starting off in a really good, strong place. And then if something goes wrong, and you get a surge inside your house, your surge protector is supposed to pick that up. It's not supposed to get, your surge protector gets struck by lightning and then it saves your gear. That's not the way this is supposed to work.
Yep. So very good. Thank you, Mario. Love to have that clarification. And yes, very important to know that it is part of national code, at least in the United States. And therefore, if you don't have that and something was recently done by an electrician, or maybe you had a new cable service hooked up or a new satellite service hooked up at your house, if they didn't do this, it means they're not following code. You have every right to call them back and say, hey, make this right. You didn't follow, actual code.
Nick figured we would enjoy a laugh, so he shared the Maestro, right?
Maestro.
I think you shouldn't spell it like that. Anyways, Maestro products that he found at Cruise First Audio. And don't go there because apparently this is a terrible place. Yeah. They list a $600 power cord, which is such a deal since it's marked down from $800, and it's sold out because they only made one. And that's nothing new. What Nick enjoyed was the Maestro outlet and the Maestro outlet faceplate, apparently only available as B stock and also sold out. Right. Amazing deal since the outlet is only $89 now, marked down from $105, and the faceplate is $60 instead of $80. But don't just go buy the bargains. Supposedly, Steve Marlowe, the president of Totality Tools Remastering, TTR, shared some of these abridged, tonality. So these are some of his comments. They are abridged, but here they are. Many audiophile power cables and outlet receptacles tend to soften and do odd things to the sound staging. None of those words are English. But not the Maestros. We listen for musicality and increased natural presence. We want to literally feel the visceral impact of microdynamics.
Microdynamics. You got to feel them,
Feel the micro.
That's right.
Dynamics that are micro, but feel them.
Yep.
Maestro actually improved the tangibility and naturalness of music and vocals. Additionally, the Maestros improved video and high-res image playback. Shut up. Maestros improved the tangibility and naturalness. Tangibility. Now, let's see. When I'm actually in a room with the person talking to me, I don't describe it as a tangible experience. Do you, Rob? Do you describe it as a tangible one? One that you feel? You feel it? You feel people talking to you?
Right.
You feel them singing?
Yeah. I don't know. No, I'm not sure what scale is used to measure the tangibility, the musicality, the naturalness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slide rule. There's an overlay for a slide rule.
So yes, this is ridiculous.
We watched
stuff.
Apollo 13. We watched Apollo 13 this week with my weekend with my kids, and they bust out a slide rule, and I got so geeky. It's like,
no, I did enjoy the idea of a $60 faceplate that just looks like a plain white piece of plastic, but you gots to have it for the audiophile naturalness.
After shopping for faucets and shower stuff, $60 for a faceplate sounds pretty dang reasonable compared to this. I mean, like, there's like a $4,000 toilet out there.
Definitely.
I mean, just I can't imagine. It's not gold or made of gold or platinum. It's just porcelain or plastic or something. I don't know. Terry says we were both right. Well, I guess that's good. Thanks, Terry. Well, moving on. Oh, wait. Terry was having the issue where the Audyssey Editor app would lose connection partway through the setup, forcing him to start over. And for some reason, when he plugged his receiver into Ethernet, it didn't show up in the app. Rob asked if maybe he had a complex network setup beyond it being a Google Mesh system, and he does. He has Ethernet jacks throughout his house, but those route back to switches that are plugged directly into his modem/router. Meanwhile, his Wi-Fi is handled by the Mesh system, so it was almost like having two networks. He plugged his receiver into one of the Mesh pucks instead, and that gave him a solid a rock solid connection. Puck. I said
Yes.
P-U-C-K
Yes.
in case anybody is mishearing me and is going to send me angry emails. So then he took my advice and changed his iPhone settings so the screen wouldn't shut off automatically. Success. He was able to run a complete Audyssey setup via the editor app, and it helped him sort some network issues that had been bugging him for a long time. So we fixed not only his problems that he knew about, but other problems we didn't know about. So
Yeah.
there we go.
Good stuff. Happy to hear it. Thank you for letting us know, Terry.
We're miracle workers over here. We really are changing the world, Rob.
Yep.
I don't know.
Gonna save all those gamers from that TCL.
That's what it sounds like when I walk in a room.
Yep. Every time.
Every time. Tim. So this is a question from Tim. The receiver upgrade conundrum. Don't. All right, done. We've said to wait on a receiver upgrade if you can, and we've paid particular attention to new gaming systems with the current lack of HDMI 2.1 switching. But if you recently got a 4K HDR TV and your existing receiver can only do 1080p, then what should you do? Are Dolby Atmos and DTS X a big enough improvement that, combined with getting 4K and HDR support, it's worth upgrading your receiver right now? If you do happen to get an HDMI 2.1 source in the future, you could just use eARC, right? So to maybe put that in more general terms, what combination of features will we say are enough to justify upgrading a receiver right away? Does your receiver currently work? And do you have a receiver at all? So if you have nothing, I would buy something. And if the thing you have does not work, I would buy a thing that does work. So if you've got a receiver that can pass through 1080p or whatever, does HDMI at all, and does lossless audio, and maybe not Atmos but lossless audio, I would wait. I think that anything lower than that, I mean, it's a million years old, but anything lower than that, then okay, maybe I could see what if you're really wanting to upgrade to Atmos and you got the new display, you got the new everything, okay, fine. But I think that for right now, I would wait 6 months to a year and get something that had all the things.
I think it's a bit of a balancing act because, first of all, if you are not a heavy-duty gamer and you do not intend to be getting a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X or a new NVIDIA 3000 series graphics card in the somewhat near future, if you don't care about any of those things, then do not worry. But go ahead and get whatever AV receiver you would like that has the audio format support that you want. You just got a 4K HDR TV, so yeah, I mean that's any receiver within the past 4, even 5 years, I think. But I mean certainly within the past 3 years, any receiver model will be able to handle that. So if the high end gaming is not a big priority to you, then absolutely do not worry about it. By all means, get one from like last year, like a 3600H or something like that. Totally fine. Also, if you are okay, like even if you are thinking, yeah, I'd probably like to get a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, because I mean, in Tim's case, he was like, yeah, it's a possibility. So if that is the case, but you are okay with plugging it into your TV directly and having using ARC or eARC to get the audio back to your AV receiver, then again, if you get a 2019 model AV receiver, they all have eARC, you're in great shape. So really, it only comes down to, are you someone who only wants to be able to plug your sources into your AV receiver and have a single HDMI cable going from the output of the AV receiver to your television? You're a person who does not want to plug any sources directly into the TV. Right. That's the person where I would say, if you're going to both go for the high-end gaming and you don't want to plug anything directly into your TV, then you basically have to wait. You don't really have any option. The only odd thing you could do is get one that has one HDMI 2.1 port on it right now. So I would definitely wait in that case. So it's that balancing act. Now he's saying, okay, I've got one. It doesn't do 4K HDR. So that can be a hassle, because if you have multiple sources, multiple 4K sources, are you going to plug all of those into your TV and then your current AV receiver doesn't even do ARC? So you're going to feed it all back via an optical cable? I mean, that now you're starting to get into, again, if the high-end gaming isn't a big priority to you, then by all means, I'd go grab a 2019 AV receiver. I'm not even particularly worried about the Atmos and DTSX formats. It's like you're going to get them if you get the HDMI 2.0 switching. Like, you don't have a choice in the matter. They're going to come in the package whether you want them or not. So I almost don't worry about the audio formats because, I mean, in all honesty, I'm not going to tell somebody who's already got Dolby True HD or DTS HD Master Audio that you got to run out right this second and get Atmos and DTS X. I'm like, you can wait on that. When you get them, maybe you like them, maybe you get used to them and you wouldn't want to go back. But you're not going to be sitting here right now listening to 7.1 True HD and going, oh, I'm missing the world. It's not. That's not the reason to do it. So. Look at the what video switching do you need and want? It's perfectly fine to say this is a want. I could plug it into my TV, but I really don't want to. That's perfectly fine. And if what you need is the video switching and HDMI 2.1 is sufficient for what you want to do, then by all means go grab a 2019.
All right, infant Gary. Could installing solar panels and generating your own electricity actually benefit the performance of your home theater at all? There are all kinds of power conditioning products. The existence of filters, voltage regulators, and surge protectors indicates that regular household electricity is less than perfect, correct? So is it possible you would see and hear an improvement from your home theater by getting off the grid and going solar? So the power conditioning products and stuff, Rob and I have often said there's very little that you really have to worry about. You're looking for surge protection and maybe voltage regulation, and that's just making sure that the power is coming out evenly. You're not having big dips or whatever, which can happen in some areas and some places.
Sometimes the filtering is handy, not so much for the power that's coming from your electric company, but if you have other devices plugged in your house that dump a lot of noise into your house wiring, then filtering that out for
if you've got an older house and stuff
devices,
like that where the wiring is not great, you guys have all experienced this, right? Like when you were kids, somebody turns on the vacuum cleaner and the old CRT gets fuzzy.
Yep.
That used to happen all the time in my house when I was growing up.
Honestly, it's more like you still have an old fridge or freezer. When that kicks on, or you have an old air conditioning system or old washer and dryer. Like those are the types of things that might put a whole bunch of noise into your house wiring. So I'm not that if that is the issue, like you still have those devices and your house wiring is still the same, then getting away from your electric company and generating your own power with solar panels isn't going to fix that issue. No. You're still going to have all that noise inside of your house wiring.
Right. But as far as is somehow solar power, better, it would all come down to how it's stored and how it's put into your house. So if you've got noisy batteries or whatever the step down voltage stuff is that because I don't know how any of that stuff works. How that whole system works, is it come out 120 rock solid the entire time until it just dies, or does it slowly peter off, or does how does everything work if your batteries start to die?
Hopefully what we start to see, I don't know why it isn't the case already, but hopefully what we start to see are just DC outlets in houses. Even if they're USB outlets, because there's not really any reason why it couldn't be USB outlets carrying DC, because the idea...
Right, you don't need AC because you're not going long distances.
Exactly, yeah. The idea of having solar panels, which are generating DC current, and then converting that to AC so that it can go into your standard wall outlets that are already wired in your house, and then plugging your device in, which will convert that AC back into DC again. And it is not a 100% efficient process, either of those conversions.
Sure.
It's inefficient to do it that way. It's unnecessary. We could just have DC outlets in our houses. Why we don't already is a mystery to me. I really wish that the world would get on that.
Easy. It's quite easy to understand that, because if you take an AC, like something that's got a DC converter on it, and plug it into a DC only outlet, you're going to get there's going to be some issues there. So,
right. So
and converting an entire country overall at the same time might be a bit.
But what I wouldn't anticipate that you're somehow going to see and hear improvements to the performance of your home theater. No, that's not what's going to happen by disconnecting from your electric company and generate. If it's geothermal power or solar power or wind power, whatever it is that you're generating on site, it's not as though those things are somehow going to improve the video and audio quality inside your house.
If you want to improve the quality of your power, you have to use a windmill. Everybody knows that. The Dutch have been doing it for centuries, so they know all about it. If you want to get the cleanest power, it's got to be windmill power. Everybody knows that. Don't be ridiculous, Gary. So in Gary's LP collection, a number of older records are actually in mono. Gary has gone to a lot of effort to acoustically treat and optimize his 2-channel listening setup, but he's always interested in hearing things presented in the very best way possible. So in the ideal scenario, would a mono recording be played out of a pair of speakers sound identical to playing that same recording through a single speaker that is positioned directly in front of you? In Gary's case, he hears an absolutely convincing phantom center that locks the mono sound between his stereo pair, but what if he physically moved one of his speakers to be directly in front of him? Would it sound identical? Gary is thinking that the bass response might change, and also the dispersion inside sidewall reflections. And if that's the case, which setup is more correct? What do we think? What do we consider to be the absolute best way to listen to mono? Don't. I guess would be my first thing. I think so. What you're describing, Gary? So. Because you've got 2 ears and you've got 2 speakers and you're sitting between the 2 speakers, probably your ears are equidistant from the right speaker to the right ear, the left speaker to the left ear. You're getting the exact same sound in the exact same phase, all at the same time, hitting your ears and your face, essentially simultaneously. So what would be the difference between that and having a single speaker directly in front of you that is just playing that same sound? Well, I mean, in theory, you would lose volume, so there would be that. But I mean, you could just turn it up; it's not that big of a deal. You could the side-to-side dispersion. I can see your argument for that. I think the reality here is, I don't know that you would notice a humongous difference unless you could A/B it really quickly, and I think the stereo pair would just sound wider and a little bit larger if you could A/B it directly. But I don't know that it would be massive. I think it would be a small difference.
I mean, where I would anticipate... So, I mean, first of all, if you were in a highly reflective room,
right.
I could imagine the potential for some of the reflections to have a slightly different sound to them, but our brain is very good at filtering out high frequency reflections, and that wouldn't be the thing I would anticipate. Where I could most definitely anticipate there being a genuine, audible, noticeable difference would be in the bass, particularly because if you don't have a very large room and you're listening to a stereo pair, they're probably relatively close to the side and front walls. In other words, relatively close to the front corners of your listening room. Whereas the single speaker directly in front of you is going to be well away from either of the corners. So I would anticipate that there would be some boundary reinforcement from the stereo pair to a greater extent than the single speaker directly in front of you. This is one of the reasons why, if you have a 3-channel setup or a regular surround sound setup, even if you have 3 identical speakers, left, center, and right, if you play a sound out of each one individually, it doesn't always sound identical coming from the center speaker as it does from your left and right speakers. And primarily it's going to be in the bass and in the low mid-range where that boundary reinforcement could make a difference. Now, if yours is a setup, I believe his is like your stereotypical audiophile 2-channel setup where it's, full range speakers, no subwoofers involved. If that's what you have, then I would definitely anticipate that difference being there in the bass. If, however, you've set up dual subs, even for a single listening position, if you've set up dual subs, if you've got really, really linear response in your bass already and you're crossing that over to your speakers, I would anticipate much less audible difference from going from the stereo pair to the single speaker, because now it's not the boundary reinforcement of the bass coming from the speakers themselves. The bass is uniform from either setup because you're using subwoofers to handle it. So that's what I would anticipate there.
Okay. So I left for a second there while Rob was talking because I was hearing something from my home theater equipment over there. It was making me stress. So last week we talked about the Xbox One being broken. Is that right?
Yes, yours. Yeah.
Yeah, I got the power supply. I got a new power supply in, and that fixed it. So the power supply had gone bad. But this one is noisy apparently. It's making a humming sound. It's an aftermarket one. I didn't realize it. I thought it was OEM, but it's not. All right, Sean. Sean has heard our projector recommendations with the Epson 5050 UB and the JVC models going to be mentioned most often. You would really like to leap up to a JVC, but price is a concern. He found the NX5 listed on proavdealer.com for about $1,000 less than is listed anywhere else. Can they be trusted? Is it a scam? Whenever you are, so you're looking for authorized dealers.
Yes.
That's the number one thing.
Very
and
much
when
so.
you do that, you do not trust the dealer to tell you if they are authorized. You go to JVC's website and you find their list of authorized dealers, and if you can't find one or you can't find their name on it, then you contact JVC directly and say, hey, is this, e-tailer, teller, retailer, are they authorized dealer?
Indeed.
And then you trust them or don't trust them, because if not, you're gonna get screwed.
Yeah, JVC makes this actually very clear on their website. They first of all have a quite large red warning listed underneath all of theirs saying, hey, there are counterfeit and non-warranted units that are out there being sold, and then also a tag that says Procision projectors are not sold online, and this proavdealer.com has an add to cart button. So that's a hint right there. Furthermore, if you click on that warning that JVC has on their website saying they're not sold online, they have a whole write-up with a link to their list of authorized dealers. Now, they do have some like the retail space exists online. For example, Projector People, which is an authorized retailer. But you'll notice if you go over to Projector People's website and try to buy one of the JVC projectors, it says, call us. Calling them on the phone is the only way to purchase this, because they are not sold online via cart system or something like that. So yeah, unfortunately, too good to be true. If you were to purchase it from there, you would not have a JVC warranty.
And that would be best case scenario.
Right.
Or at the end, you might not have a JVC projector either. You might have something else. Or a functional one.
Yeah.
So the Epson 5040UB units can still be found, particularly on the used market. And even if you buy a brand new bulb, the price is very attractive. So what's the reason to avoid the 5040UB again? Is it what he's heard about them often needing servicing from Epson or something? I don't remember the 5040s. I thought they were good. I don't know why you would avoid them.
So, I mean,
weren't we recommending them before the 5050s? And then the 5050s were like, oh, yeah, these are better.
Well, the one big feature is that with the 5040UB, if you want to watch 4K with HDR, you are limited to 24 frames a second. That is the limitation. There's nothing that can be done about it. That is the bandwidth of the HDMI ports that are on board. So when the 5050 UB came out, it can do 4K at 60 frames per second in HDR. So if you want to do any gaming on an Xbox One, we're not even talking about the next generation systems, on a current Xbox One S or X or a PlayStation 4 Pro, you don't want to be limited to 24 frames a second when you're gaming, that's for sure, in 4K and HDR. So that was sort of the big feature that was, missing on the 5040 UB, was the ability to do 4K at 60 frames per second with HDR. Now, there was a fair amount of chatter on forums. Quite a few people were having failing power supplies in the Epson 5040 UB. It did anecdotally seem to be more than is typical. But every report is that Epson has stood behind the product. They've had fast replacements, like literally within 1 or 2 days, a replacement shows up at your door. And they have not issued a recall. So anecdotally, it certainly seems like this was a larger issue than is normal for most projectors, power supply issues. But as long as they stand behind it, and they will always do the cost-benefit analysis, any company will, and they have decided that it's not so much that issuing a recall would save them more money than just replacing the units that occasionally fail. So if you aren't worried about 4K with 60 frames per second HDR, you're not a gamer, and you don't care about the 2 Ang Lee movies that are in 4K 60 on Ultra HD Blu-ray, then a 5040 UB can be a very good choice.
I mean, to put my 2 cents in on this, when I thought my projector was broken, I was looking at the 5040s because they were like selling B stock or selling them out, the last of their models on the Epson website. I was looking at the 5040s, and believe me, the gaming never came up for me, and having 24 whatever was just fine. So I would have no problems buying one for myself. So if that's not a recommendation, I don't know what you want us to say.
Right. I mean, even if you are a gamer, you can just set your system to output 1080p at 60 with HDR, and that'll work on a 5040 UB just fine.
Brandon asks, would we recommend either dual SVS PB4000s or PC4000 subs over dual SB16 Ultras if his theater area is open to the rest of his house?
Yes.
The SB16 Ultras. I mean, I would pretty much I would go with the PB4000.
I would go with ported, unquestionably. If you do not have an enclosed room, if your theater area is open to the rest of your house, you want to go ported for sure. With the sealed subs, even the massive SB16 Ultra, there is a 12 decibel per octave roll-off happening, and it starts up where, the natural tuning of the driver itself is, which in the case of the SB16 Ultra is about 32, 33 hertz. At that point, it starts to roll off just inherently, and at about a 12 decibel per octave slope. That's just kind of unavoidable with a sealed subwoofer. You can do some tricks with DSP to boost things up, but that starts raising the distortion and lowering the overall headroom at frequencies above that point where it starts to roll off. With a ported sub, you have the port using the resonance of that port to amplify the deep bass. So what is coming out of the subwoofer to begin with is much more of a flat line. It doesn't have any roll off until it gets to below the tuning point of the port, at which point it rolls off quite steeply at like 24 decibels per octave. So yeah, I mean the PB4000 or the PC4000 cylinder version, it's going to be a flat line down to about 16 hertz, and whether the room is open or not, it's going to remain a flat line. So in a wide open space, ported is the way to go.
Yeah. Tom, different Tom. Tom has a couple of different setups in this 2.1 setup. He has experimented with using a mini DSP to individually adjust the parametric EQ, delays, and high and low fast pass filters for his front, left, and right speakers and the sub. He really loves having that kind of granular control, which allows him to tweak things, measure with Room EQ Wizard, analyze the results, and learn through trial and error. So in his 5.1 setup, which he plans to upgrade to 5.2 in the not-too-distant future, he wants to know if the manual controls built into any particular receiver out there will afford him a similar level of tweaking. If costs were no object, he figures he'd get a Pro, a multi-channel mini DSP and a separate amp, but cost is an object, so just a receiver on its own is more in line with what he's looking to spend. His current Sony receiver cannot pass through 4K or HDR, and he isn't a fan of its room correction. Yeah, you and everybody else who's experienced it. He's toying with the idea of expanding to Atmos, but it isn't a priority. 5.2 is what he is sure he wants to do first. Obviously, we tend to recommend Den and Marantz most often, but can the Audyssey Editor App meet his wants in terms of being able to adjust filters and delays for each individual channel? Is there some other receiver that would be a better choice for him? They are not going to give you the granular control that you want.
I mean,
as much as I want.
It's a fair amount of control, but I don't think it's as precise and granular as it sounds.
You could
like
change all. See, I haven't even gotten into it this deep because I never seen any point to doing it, but I think you can go into each channel, right, and change the curves.
Yeah, you can go into each speaker channel. You can gate how low and how high in frequency that equalization is applied whatsoever. So if you don't want to have any equalization applied to your mid-range and treble, you can gate that off in the Audyssey Editor app, and that can be as precise as you want it. But changing the target curve, I mean, it's literally done with your finger on a touch screen. Yeah. And I think he wants like
you want a Mac Pro. He went with those iPad Pros, the massive ones that look like you're carrying around a 17-inch monitor with you.
I mean, it does show you on screen the exact frequency and decibel amount that you are adjusting, but it can be a little bit finicky getting it exactly right with your finger, and unfortunately there's not like a keyboard or mouse way to do that. Well, I don't know, maybe there's some way to attach a mouse to an iPad or something. There probably is. I don't know, I've never done it.
At least a stylus, right? There should be a stylus thing.
Yeah, but that is basically what's going on there. I'm not sure if it's as detailed and accurate and fine granular as you really want to. Delays would come in the form of the distance setting for your speakers.
Yeah.
So again, again there, though, if you're doing the calculations based on delays, you almost have to do everything in reverse, because the speaker that is given a distance that is closest to you is the one that is actually delayed the most. Right? Because the speaker that is physically closer to you has to be delayed in order for it to be time aligned with the speaker that's farther away from you. So it's some mental gymnastics to do the delay setting via distance. But I mean, it could be done. That is how you would come at it. The filtering, as far as setting high and low pass filters, there, I mean, in the target curve, for the low end of your speaker, say, you can make that roll off whatever you want in the target curve, but it doesn't have the sort of thing like the mini DSP does, where you can just say, I want a 12 decibel per octave roll off, I want an 18, I want a 24. You can't just set it like that and have it do that for you. You'd kind of have to draw it with your finger in the target curve. So because of all that, I do think you might appreciate Dirac. This is where Dirac excels. It is all done on your laptop or your desktop with the separate Dirac software. It is more granular. It is more precise in terms of, the manual adjustments that you're making to it. I think it is something you would appreciate. And what I think is probably the most cost-effective way to get into Dirac, all built into an AV receiver and ready to go, would be NAD, N-A-D. Their T758. It's now the V3i because they just added AirPlay. So they got to throw a little I on the end there.
Welcome to 7 years ago.
Little behind the times as far as that goes. But anyway, it is now the V3i instead of just the V3. But AirPlay was pretty much the only thing that got added. But it goes for about $1,500. Now, that's not cheap, but compared to
cheaper than the alternative.
Compared to getting an outboard multi-channel mini DSP and outboard amplification, like even if you chose an AV receiver as your pre-pro to keep the cost of that, like you'd still be more than $1,500, because like the cheapest multi-channel mini DSP that does everything you want to do alone is $600. And then you're probably going to go for like the Outlaw, 5-channel amplifier is $750. So right away, you're as soon as you add an AV receiver or pre-pro, you're definitely over. So
over $1,500 bucks. Yeah.
So that would be the sort of value choice there. It's actually for someone who's maybe has an interest in Atmos but isn't quite sure. The NADs are actually a really good choice because it has 7 amplifiers built in. It's a 7-channel AV receiver to begin with, but it does have height 1 and height 2 pre-outs available. So if you ever want to, you can add some more external amplification and have 4 overhead speakers and 7 floor level speakers. It has the ability to do that. So the price is going to be the question mark. But if you can put all that together, I think that might be the way to go for you.
All right. Billy says we've been very helpful with our advice about acoustic treatments, surround speakers, and which Ultra HD Blu-ray player to get in his cozy home theater setup. So he's got a black box, basically, and a 2.35 to 1 screen that goes wall to wall.
Literally wall to wall.
He is currently using a Sony VW675ES genuine 4K resolution projector, and he wants to know if we think the JVC NX7 would be a worthwhile upgrade. Yes. He is mostly happy with his 2-year-old Sony. It has a nice close to plasma black levels, but it doesn't have the high native contrast levels of the JVC, and it doesn't have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. As we mentioned in the news, JVC is just doing another firmware update this year, so when do we expect new models will be released, and what upgrades do we think they will bring? Better to wait or switch to JVC right now? If I were going to wait, I would probably still buy the current year models, because I would be waiting for cheaper prices. I don't see anything coming out. I mean, earliest would be Christmas. Well, Christmas, but CES. The earliest would be CES.
Something announced at CES. I don't really expect that.
I don't see them. I don't see new models coming out for them until CD of next year, and that's only if COVID has gotten controlled to the point where production is not as such an issue. I can't even buy pickles, sir. The pickles I like are not in stock any longer. I haven't been able to buy Good Seasons Italian dressings, those little packets, That's only dressing up one of my sons will eat.
I see.
And I haven't been able to find it in months. You think that HDMI boards are easy to come by these days? I just don't see them putting out anything until it becomes a lot more, because all the AV receiver guys, all the TV guys are going to be clamoring for these boards, and projectors just aren't a high enough priority, I think.
Yeah. Definitely. I don't think we're going to see any new models from JVC until November 2021 at the absolute earliest. And even that, just like Tom, I question a little bit, but I wouldn't expect, with the news that this year is just going to be another firmware update. 2021 Cedia time, that is absolutely the earliest I am anticipating something new.
Yeah.
I do think, if things were normal, I would definitely anticipate new models coming out 2021 Cedia time.
Yes.
Yes. It's only because of a global pandemic that I questioned a little bit, but if things improve, I would anticipate new models. Now, historically, what would we expect from JVC to improve from model to model? Well, if we go back to their 1080p DILA projectors that had the best black levels going at the time, they did tend to improve their already excellent contrast and black levels. They tended to improve that a little bit. Of course, with processing chips upping in power, they would improve the video processing a little bit. How revolutionary those are going to be, there's room for improvement with these genuine 4K models in terms of the absolute black level and the native contrast of the panels themselves. The current ones are not as good as the final generation of the 1080p ones were. The final generation of the 1080p actually had better black levels and native contrast of the panels than the 4K ones. So there's room for improvement, and I would anticipate that being part of the next generation of JVC projectors. HDMI 2.1 with 4K 120 support, I don't know. To me, that's really iffy. I would like to see it, of course, but I'm really iffy on that. They do have this 8K wobble K version. That's the NX9. Right. It's a genuine 4K panel that's being wobbled twice per frame to give you a pseudo 8K support. It doesn't actually have an HDMI 2.1 port. It's the 8K limited to 24 frames a second with 420 chroma subsampling just to get you to the 8K resolution. That's what it's got right now. So I could see on the flagship, like whatever replaces the NX9, that they would probably, like, it's already a $16,000 projector. If it costs you $500 or $1,000 more to get HDMI 2.1 in its replacement, I think they're going to do it. It's already in that luxury tier pricing. So that one, I think, will get HDMI 2.1 for sure. The other ones, I don't know. I don't know how much they prioritize 4K 120 support. Are these targeted at gamers? I don't know. These are $6,000 to start. I don't know how much they're targeted at gamers. Should you run out and get an NX5 or an NX7 right now to replace your Sony? I don't think so. What you have right now is a really good projector. The only thing I would personally want that your VW675 doesn't have is dynamic tone mapping. But we're talking about waiting a year to see. Like, you're not suffering right now. Right. You've got a very good projector. I think I would wait on it because you've already got a genuine 4K projector. Right.
It's hard not to look and wonder what could be in these situations. So, and we talk so highly of the JVCs and stuff like that. But the reason we suggest the JVCs over the Sonys is what? Price? For the most part.
It's not even
the
price.
Tone mapping.
They do have better native contrast on the panel, and it's the dynamic tone mapping. So,
but some of these things are like, if you're going to buy something within a certain price range, you get the best one, and we'll show you that way. But if you got like the second best one, you still don't have a bad one.
Right.
You just have you just don't have the one that we would suggest you would have gotten, but that you've gotten it, and it's like, somebody comes up to me, I'm like, what receiver should I buy? Denon. Oh, I bought a Yamaha. Oh, yeah, it's great. Yeah. Yamaha's great. I'm not mad at you at all. It's good.
And you don't have to return it. If you were coming from, I don't have a projector, which one should I get? Right. Then I'd be like, okay.
Or 1080p or something
even
like
if the NX7 is $500 more than the Sony, I would say, here are the arguments why that $500 extra would be worth it. But you're coming from already having a really, really good projector. I would wait the year. I honestly would.
Okay. There you go. His left surround speaker started making a hissing noise. It was intermittent. He swapped the speaker with his right surround, which was working fine, and the intermittent hiss remained in the left surround channel, so it doesn't seem to be the speaker itself. He redid the speaker wire, and the hiss got quieter, but didn't go away entirely. What would we suggest he do next as a troubleshooting measure? Is he going to need to contact Marantz, the receivers at SR7012? Did you try vacuuming it? I think this might be another vacuum solution. So wiring, if it's not the speaker itself, it's either the wire or something within the receiver. Those are the only true options that are going on there. I guess the other theoretical one is that your left surround speaker is so far away from you that the volume has been turned up the trim level has been turned up so high that it's actually the noise floor, but that seems highly unlikely.
We know in his theater that is not the case.
Yeah. Considering where we see your walls are in your theater, seems to be unlikely.
If it were inherent noise floor, you'd be hearing it in other speaker channels, not just the surround left. It'd be in all of them. So usually when you redo your speaker wire, everything in the back of the speaker gets kind of cleaned off just by moving it and stuff. So double check, make sure there's nothing laying on top of these two speakers, make sure the wires are connected correctly. And then if that doesn't work, it's unplug the unit, take off the top, which usually is maybe you have to take off the top, but just blow some compressed air through it, or vacuum it or something like that, and see if there's anything else in there that could be doing this, and then call Marantz. I was going to say the full troubleshooting here, because when you say that you redid the speaker wire and then the hiss got quieter, I'm like, I don't think it's the Marantz. I think it is a wiring issue, because if it were the Marantz, then redoing the speaker wire wouldn't have made a difference. I think you're picking up some interference somewhere. So the full troubleshooting measure would be, you unplug everything from the back of the Marantz, maybe even just pull the Marantz out, take it to another room, and then with a short speaker wire that just goes straight from nothing but the surround left channel to one speaker, away from everything else. Don't have the speaker wire draped over anything or crisscrossed with anything or anything like that. You just have that one, and then you just play the trim level test tone out of surround left, or you even just hook it up, because he says you're just hearing a hiss when it's sitting there idle. If that doesn't happen in the scenario where you've taken the receiver to another room and the only thing connected is the one speaker, then it's not the receiver. It's a wiring problem. And then it's a matter of you're connecting one thing at a time until you discover what it is that's creating the interference. I suspect that's what it is, and that would be the full and complete troubleshooting solution.
Right. Okay. Jay, what's our take on the recent federal court ruling that will allow for the end of Paramount Consent Decrees? The decrees were the result of 10 years of litigation that started in 1938 that prevented the major movie studios from owning their own theaters and strong-arming independent theater owners and independent movie makers with anti-competitive tactics. The judge ruled that the decrees aren't necessary anymore because of today's antitrust laws and merger laws. Furthermore, the decrees only applied to the specific studios named at the time, several of which no longer exist, and they have never applied to newer companies like Netflix, Amazon, and Apple. Supporters of the decision say it will lead to more innovation, new business models, and that be a benefit to consumers. But opponents point out that this could allow for essentially the same circumstances that led to the decrees in the first place, which is that the independent studios could be squeezed out of studio-owned theaters and distribution platforms, and collusion among the giant companies would make it virtually impossible for any smaller ventures to compete. What do we think? I think that movie theaters are dying. If somebody wants to buy into them right now, more power to them. So I see both points of this pretty clearly. I see kind of where both sides are coming from. The fact that there are movie studios out there right now, that didn't exist before, that aren't subject to these decrees. Maybe they were not doing things like owning their own, opening their own theaters and then trying to run all the other business out of town. Maybe Maybe they weren't doing that because they were afraid that somebody would sue them, and then the decrees would be used as
they would get added to them.
Leverage.
There is your precedent that is in current effect, and they're going to say, "Hey, look, this doesn't." MGM, Warner Brothers, they were around at the time when these decrees were made. Paramount is still around, so they're the one that's named. It's like they can't do this. So if Apple were to buy a bunch of theaters, if Amazon were to buy a bunch of theaters and try to do the sort of practices that were not allowed under the decrees, then it's I don't know. I mean, certainly there's going to be a lawsuit saying, hey, the other studios can't do it. Why should they be able to? But now the decrees are going away.
Right.
Or at least they're on their way out. It's being turned over to the Department of Justice, and they're going to be able to make some decisions here. I mean, this is an overarching topic that The Verge, I think, has been covering very well, which is just the sort of overall philosophy that the United States has had towards anti-competitive, antitrust type of issues, because they've done a very good job over at The Verge of laying out how there was a shift that took place, I think it was sort of towards the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, where it used to be about maintaining competition, and then it shifted to the metric that you use is, does this raise prices for consumers? Whereas the European Union, when they formed, they're like, hey, this we should maintain competition thing that the United States is doing, that's a really good idea, and we're going to base our philosophy off of that. So today you can sort of see the two approaches, the one saying this, the only thing that really matters is end user price, and as long as end user price doesn't go up, we're basically okay. Merge as much as you want, do whatever practices you want, as long as end user price doesn't go up, we're going to be okay with it. Versus the EU that's saying no, it has to be about business competition, because ultimately you're going to end up with monopolies otherwise. So I tend to fall on the idea that competition is the way that you want to go, that you don't want to see massive monopolies forming, because eventually massive monopolies control the government, and then they make the rules, and that doesn't seem like a great idea. You want to maintain a lot of competition in a capitalist society, in my opinion anyway. So I would rather have seen, I do think the decrees needed to be updated in a major way. They were written in 1938. Some things have changed. But the idea of allowing them to just go away entirely, I don't think that's a great idea. But under current law, it all makes sense. I don't think that this judge made some way out to left field decision. The arguments were there, and it makes sense. So, yeah.
I think that the minute that somebody tries to, inch their way, like Amazon decides they're going to start to open movie theaters, or buys AMC.
Yes.
He tries to buy AMC. Suddenly, there's going to be, a whole lot of lawyers who are looking to make a name for themselves, who are going to try to, get in on that. So to stop that from happening. So we'll see. Do I think it's a bad idea? Or it's a good idea. I tend to err on the side of wait and see on stuff like this, mostly because usually, and not always, but usually the ship rights itself as far as these things are concerned. Somebody tries to grab too much power, and then the government or some private citizens who have the means or whatever will step in and try to make things right, or some private interest group or whatever will bring stuff, and it doesn't always work out that way.
On a long enough timeline, I suppose.
On a long timeline, it tends to sort of work itself out. To me, this is not like an area where I'm looking at the potential impact of it and thinking, how is this going to negatively impact either society, myself, or the industry. And I think the industry itself, like I said jokingly at the beginning, is dying. I think that movie theaters were already in a very bad place and seem to have been completely stifled or maybe not stifled is the wrong word. They were completely bereft of ideas, of innovations, and they were in no way interested in innovating in any way other than increasing their prices and then putting more stupid chairs that move in their things. And I think that if somebody were to come in and start to innovate that, rather than, if Amazon came in and bought AMC and then said, it's all going to be VR, I'd be like, well, that's great. Let's
Maybe
do this.
Facebook
It sounds
will
like
do that. Facebook owns Oculus.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I mean, something along those lines. I don't see that the movie theater industry is like this industry that's such a juggernaut. If somebody monopolized it, it would suddenly have this massive impact. It's very much like reading like Ayn Rand stuff, and then there's always talking about the railroad being this most important thing. And I'm like, who gives a crap about the railroads?
They're still important.
I
You're talking
understand
about
that they
not being
are.
able to get goods at the grocery store. A lot of that has to do with the railroads.
It's not the railroads. It's the stupid cucumber growers or something. I don't know what's going on. But if you go to Clausen's, because Clausen's the only pickles I buy, you go to Clausen's Facebook page, they insist that there are pickles. I'm like, there's not, though. Like, there's just page and page of people complaining that they can't find their pickles. It's an important thing. My kids are like, I had a pickle with my dinner tonight, and two of my kids went to grab pickles, and I almost punished them. I was almost like, you're not even enjoying them. You don't even know how to eat them right. All right, Chris. Chris is back with some more details about his satanic theater. This is the place he's renting, in which he has fashioned wood beam supports for his projector and screen and secured those beams with clamps and shims. It's the one where I suggested that he could make an inverted cross.
That's right.
So he could put his side surrounds at the end of the cross thing.
Yep.
And then sacrifice a goat to it, and then Anyways, the contract for his rental says that no fasteners other than picture frame hooks are allowed. So that's why he's gone with clamps and friction fittings, and he's still trying to decide what to do in the way of surround speakers. Okay, so the inverted cross didn't play. That didn't play.
You'll see.
All right. So last time we didn't know what front speakers he was using. He says they are Paradigms. So should he follow our advice from last time and just get one of the smaller Paradigm bookshelf models, or should he get the adaptive dipole surround one speakers, or should he go with a different brand entirely? Paradigms are pretty neutral.
Yes.
You could go with just about anything. I would more worry about size, because these are going to be placed very close to you based on unless you're doing something weird, but these things are not very far away. Nothing seems to be all that far away from you, so I don't think that you have to worry too much about efficiency or bass output. So I think I would more worry about size, and just all the speakers we normally recommend. I would get one of those, and no dipoles are not the way I would go. I would just get a regular old monopole speaker.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can easily say something like Atom monitors, from the monitor series. The Atom speaker that they have would absolutely work perfectly fine in here. That would keep it all Paradigm, or I'm not certain what series of Paradigm speakers that he has, but if you just want to look in the exact same series, or the current series that is the equivalent of the series that you have if it's an older one, and just go for the bookshelf model, that would be totally fine. But I would also say, since we are talking about Paradigm and they go for a very neutral sound with pretty standard efficiency, that if you went for something like SVS Prime satellites that have a nice little keyhole mount on the back of them, so even if you do want to do a crazy mounting thing, it's got a keyhole mount right there. NHT Super Zeros that Tom mentioned last time, again, I think either of those would be a really good solution here, that you would not notice a timbre mismatch, you would not notice a big efficiency mismatch, and the size would be very easy to handle.
So he's still considering the idea that Tom got such a kick out of last time, attaching a horizontal 2x4 to the vertical beam that supported the supporting projector just behind his couch, and using that mount to mount his speakers, surround speakers. And then he's going to paint it black and then have it dripping blood. Lots of candles all over it, like melted candles, but they can't, no white candles. They only got like black and green. It's like a witch blew up in there and melted.
Nice.
But he is open to speaker stands as well. We suggested the Santa Steel series, since we said they can pretty much hold anything, including large heavy speakers if that's what he already had. But now that we know he can use much smaller speakers, is there a specific stand we would recommend? He also wants to know how tall they ought to be. Well, the bottom of the speaker well, I mean, technically, I guess, depending on where you're planning on placing them exactly. If you place them to either side of the couch, you want your tweeter to be, maybe a foot or higher than your ear or something like that, just so that you can clear all the heads all the way over, maybe 18 inches higher.
Yeah.
Than your ear at your seated position, so that the person on the other side of the couch also has a line of sight to it. So that's kind of depending on the height of the speaker. Then you measure down to the bottom from the tweeter to the bottom of the speaker, and then the bottom speaker to the ground, and that's how tall your speaker should be. Your stand should be.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking a typical 36 to 40 inches as your seated ear height, then your head extends a little ways above your ear. So let's call it something like 42 to 45 inches. Something like 42 inches would definitely work. That would get it high enough to clear everybody's heads. It would certainly clear your seat backs. But that's the tweeter. We're talking about the tweeter being at 40, 45 inches or something like that. And the speakers we're talking about 8 inches tall. So yeah, I mean, if you had stands that are in the 38 inch range, something like that, it's almost certainly going to work, like a 36 or something like that. But Sanus has an adjustable speaker stand that can go anywhere between 28 to 42 inches tall. It has a couple of different base, the thing that holds the speaker on the top of the stand there. A couple of different options for you. It's got an L bracket that actually can be attached to like a 5-inch by 5-inch base. So if you do get something like the SVS Prime Elevation speaker that has the keyhole mount on the back, you can even secure it to the L bracket. Have a really secure connection. I would just use museum putty because that is going to provide some damping and hold the speaker very securely. But they have the Sanus adjustable stands over at Best Buy. They're $77 and some change for a pair of them, so not crazy overpriced. And for some basically satellite or very small bookshelf speakers, ideal.
Those aren't nearly evil enough, though. You need something slightly more evil than that.
Dress them up.
Dress them up. That's right. Dip them in pig's blood. All right. Asa. Asa? Asa? Asa.
I think it's Asa.
It's only 3 letters. A-S-A. I mean, I don't know how else I could pronounce it. Asa is in the process of upgrading a very old 5.1 home theater in a box in pieces at a time. He started the upgrades with a Denon S730H receiver and a JBL SUP. I'm sorry, SUP. JBL Sub 550p subwoofer, a 10-inch sealed 500 watt, which is positioned in the front right corner of his room. It's now time to get new front speakers. Asa has a media center piece of furniture that holds his TV and front speakers. God love you. We've all been saddled with these things from one time or another. I know I've owned my fair share. It's about 8 feet from his couch. Space is restricted, so one of the few speaker models that we've recommended that would physically fit the NHD Super Zeros, but even those would have to lay on their sides. Is that any sort of significant problem, having the Super Zeros on their sides? They'd be just a little bit below ear level. Is there anything else that would be a lot better for about the same price or less? I think that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
Lay them on their sides.
Laying them on their sides is no significant problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put the tweeter on the inside.
Yep, tweeter on the inside.
That's what I would do. Tweeter on the inside, woofer on the outside.
And for the center, it really doesn't matter. You're just going to have it so that it looks appropriate. So no worries there. And I mean, 8 feet away, I'm not worried about output capabilities.
Nope.
They are very nice neutral speakers that we recommend all the time. So, I mean, $125 each. There's nothing that leaps to mind that's of a similar size and capability for less.
No, not for less.
No.
You can spend more.
Oh, you can spend more or get something similar.
You can get bigger speakers. Yeah.
But no, I think that's a very good choice.
Yeah, he plans to upgrade his surround speakers later. So for the time being, he'll still be using the home theater in a box satellites. His receiver has Audyssey. It should probably be in air quotes. And the auto setup set the crossover frequency at 250 hertz. He's a bit concerned because the specs for the JBL Sub lists its frequency response as 27 to 150, and the crossover knob on the back of the Sub only goes up to 150. The Sub does have an input mode switch, though, and the manual says that if you set that to LFE and plug the subwoofer cable into the LFE in connector, then the internal low pass filter will be bypassed. So what's going to happen? Will the subwoofer be okay if the receiver sets its surrounds to 250? Will he have a hole in the frequency response between 150 and 250? Should he manually lower the crossover for the surrounds? Nothing should explode. So let's just start there. No matter what you do here, I don't think anything will explode.
No, having the subwoofer play higher is not a problem.
Yeah.
That's not a significant issue.
So what should you do? First of all, it's the surrounds, right? So the surrounds are at 250.
Yeah.
So let's just think of all the deep bass that's put in your surrounds.
Right.
Let's just think about all of it right now.
An indication that this probably wasn't the best home theater in a box ever. Which I can believe.
Well, when was the last time? Do they even sell these?
Oh yeah, there's still home theater in boxes.
Do they really?
Oh, yeah.
I have not seen a home theater in a box in a hot minute. All right, so 250. Yeah, first of all, there's not that much bass in the surrounds anyway, so don't worry too much about that. Your new NHD Super Zeros will play just fine down to 180. Something like that. I don't remember what they go down to. But whatever they do, they'll do it just fine. And that's where more bass would be. But I would just plug it in the way that you're planning with the LFE in, and so it bypasses the internal crossover. Use the crossover that Audyssey sets, because even early editions of Audyssey, which is almost certainly what this is, can set crossovers just fine.
Well, they'll often set it lower than we would like if you have larger speakers. But
that won't be a problem here.
No,
that's not going to be too much of an issue.
There's a possibility, depending on the way that your JBL subwoofer works, that it might not be the most linear thing above 200 hertz. We have seen that in subwoofers where they're not necessarily super linear above 200 hertz, but honestly, if that's the low end, there's a chance that your satellite speakers actually weren't even getting down to 250, and that's just the highest setting that is available in the AV receiver. So I would tend to err on the side of protecting the little satellites that clearly do not have bass output. Allow it to set the crossover at 250 hertz. I'm not super worried about some non-linearity from the subwoofer, from just the surround channels. That really doesn't bother me. I'd leave it alone.
Right. So if a sub is being sent, and first of all, let's put sub in quotes here too. It's being sent surround channels.
That's a subwoofer. Come on, 10-inch, 500 watts. That's a subwoofer. 500
watts. That it sounds like the smaller version of the. Is this a JBL? Yeah. Is that what this is, or JBL? Sounds like the smaller version of the sub that because I remember having a set like this for my parents. And I think there was a 12-inch and a 10-inch version. And I got them the 12-inch, or I told them to buy
There's probably an 8, version. Too. There usually is.
Right, there usually is. So it's probably what this is. And that sub did pretty well.
Yeah.
That sub hung in there. So the sub is being sent surround channel sounds all the way down to 250. Are those going to be localizable? Or all the way up to 250, others going to be localizable. His sub is at the front of his room, so is it going to seem as though some sounds suddenly move from the back to the front? How much content is in the 80 to 250 range in the surround channels anyways? Not a ton.
Not a lot.
And when there is, it's probably in the front anyways as well. It's sort of the thing that goes all the way around you. It's very rarely just in your back right corner or something like that. So I feel like this would be a very non-issue.
Yeah, no, I will still definitely come down on the side of protecting little satellite speakers that you have. Yeah. This is not something that concerns me very much at all. There is not a ton of bass content to begin with in the surround channels. And then 250 hertz is lower than you think. We tend to think that 80 hertz, most of the bass that we think of is 500 hertz. That's a lot of the bass that we imagine when we think of what bass sounds like. Not a concern. Leave it at 250. Don't worry about that.
This is why when people get dual subs, they suddenly think they have no bass anymore. Because all the problems that were up at 500 and 250 and 100 stuff like that. All these sounds that were all messed up suddenly get evened out, and then they're like, we don't have any bass. But then when the 20 hertz kicks in, it's like, hello, here I am. So on this Denon S730H, if he uses the audio listening mode,
auto,
God, that makes so much more sense. Auto listening mode, the front panel always shows that it's applying the up mixer. For example, while not watching Netflix, it will show DD plus Dolby Sur, which is surround, of course. But he's only using 5 speakers, so is he correct to assume that for 5.1 content, the upmixers being applied has no effect? It should sound exactly the same as using the movie, music, or game listening mode buttons to set it to plain Dolby Digital or Dolby Digital Plus or whatever, right? So it sounds like it is taking it from the lower resolution DD Plus and then trying to do something to it. Is that what I'm gathering?
No, it's just that on the Denons and Marantz's, if you use the auto listening mode, which you access by pressing the pure listening mode button, there's 4 listening mode buttons on the remote: movie, music, game, and pure. If you press the pure button 3 times, because it'll cycle from direct to pure direct to auto. And in the auto mode, anytime you get a Dolby signal of any kind, Dolby Digital Plus, Dolby True HD, anything that is not Atmos, any of those signals, it will just have the Dolby Surround Up Mixer active. And if it's a DTS signal of any kind other than DTS X, it'll just have the Neural X Up Mixer active. You don't get a choice in the matter. That's what it does automatically. So I think it's just the default display. That's what auto always does. If all you have are 5 speakers, there's nothing to upmix.
There's nothing for it to do. That's the confusing part.
Yeah.
So I'm confused with you. So I understand.
It's a good question, but no, you are correct. If you were to switch over to just your vanilla Dolby Digital 5.1 mode by pressing the movie button, say, you're not going to hear any difference because you don't have additional speakers for the surround up mixer to do anything with.
Jonathan, with the CDEN Theater. Oh, right, the CDEN. This is Seahawks,
That's right.
Seahawks is with the CDEN. So what's our go-to recommendation for computer speakers these days? It's still Audio Engine.
It's still Audio Engine.
It has not changed.
In years.
Man, I used to really love my Swan, whatever they were, speakers, which were like full-fledged bookshelf speakers, but for computers, which were great. But then Audio Engine came out, and I'm like, wow, these are much smaller and just about, sure, they don't have quite as much bass, but who cares? This sounds great.
And they got all the features you could possibly want for a computer speaker. So the A2 Plus wireless now is their smallest speaker, $270 for a pair. So it's not the cheapest computer speakers ever.
Right, they're not the cheapest. That is the thing. You are paying for these.
But it's still a pretty reasonable price, just a little over $250. Got a USB input, got analog audio inputs, got subwoofer output, and now it can take Bluetooth directly. You don't even have to have your computer on. You can just turn the speakers on and play Bluetooth to them directly because they're wireless now. That Audio Engine A2 Pluses. That's where I'm going to point pretty much anybody.
Stefan in Belgium. I want to go to Belgium. I actually just want to go anywhere that's not Florida. Well, not Venezuela. I don't want to go there. But there's lots of places I would like to go, especially Austria. I want to go to Austria real bad right now because Austria is having climbing competitions again. And I'm like, I want to go someplace that could be safe. Stefan in Belgium. Robin Lee tackled Stefan's question during one of the weeks when I was away. His room has exposed ceiling joists that run from left to right overhead. They are 2.3 inches wide and 6.7 inches top to bottom.
So that's the joists. So they're coming down from the ceiling, but they're running across left to right above his head.
He asked if he should install drywall in between these exposed joists to create a cavity where he could install in-ceiling speakers. He is using B&W speakers, so both Rob and Lee felt strongly that he should leave the ceiling as is and just attach some B&W satellite speakers to the joists if he wants Atmos, but there's more to it. Stefan has a whole plan in mind that would include in-ceiling LED lights since he doesn't like his current lighting that hangs down from the ceiling, and he was also hoping to improve the soundproofing since it is a kid's room above the theater. He is fully on board with the idea of having backer boxes. So he's got a top. Okay, so joists.
Yeah, so these are the exposed joists in the diagram that we're showing. So those are visible in the theater. Those are hanging down from the ceiling. And he's thinking he could put some drywall in between the joists. As you'll read in just a moment, he still wants to be able to see the joists for the look, but only a little bit of them, not 6.7 inches of them.
Just the tip?
Yep. Just
the tip.
Just the outer tip. He still wants to see him, so he's thinking to put drywall in between the exposed joists and then install LED in-ceiling lighting and in-ceiling speakers into that new drywall that is in between these joists.
All right. So he still like to have a small amount of the joist visible. He doesn't want to just drywall a flat ceiling across the bottom of the exposed joist. Since they are 2.3 inches wide, he'd like to have 2.3 inches of height still exposed. That leaves only 4.4 inches for the depth of the in-ceiling speakers. And if he's going to have backer boxes, the depth needs to be even less than that, about 3.8 inches. The only B&W in-ceiling speakers you can find that would fit are really small with tiny 3.5-inch drivers. So he would like an alternative. Kev has some very low profile in-ceiling models, but what are our thoughts on the possibility of using those along with his B&W floor level speakers? And are there any other options we would recommend? These are Atmos, right?
These are for
We're just
Atmos.
looking for Atmos. Yeah, who gives a crap?
The only qualm I have with going with those Kefs
right.
is that they aren't cheap.
Yeah,
they do have some
well, we don't know because
profile.
they're in Belgium. They might be cheap in Belgium. We don't know.
Kef isn't
Seems unlikely,
cheap
though.
anywhere. I mean, they're not crazy overpriced. We like Kef a lot, but they're not cheap.
Right.
So because there is an alternative that I'm aware of where actually the sound signature is a little bit closer to B&W, which is Q Acoustics. Q Acoustics is definitely available in Belgium. I looked that up. So they're in the UK, they're in France, and they're definitely in Belgium. I think they actually have like a distribution center in Belgium. So Q Acoustics is most definitely available, and they have their QI65, which is for the 6.5-inch diameter driver that's in them. P or C to tell you the shape, because they can be in a rectangular shape or they can be in a circular shape. But they go for, most places I was looking up, it was about 150 to 160 pounds for a pair of them. In euros, it came to like 175, 180 for a pair of them.
That's not that bad.
Which is pretty reasonable for in-ceiling speakers. And Q Acoustics, they are a British speaker brand. They have a little bit of that British sound that B&W also has. So in terms of character of the sound, quite close. And then the ones that they make are, now they're not as shallow as the Kef ones that you looked at, but they are 79 millimeters, which is like just a hair over 3 inches. And you said you'd have probably about 3.8 inches to play with. So 3 inches should fit. Yeah. So I like those Q Acoustic ones. They're affordable. They have the same sort of British sound as what you already have, and they got the shallow depth that you need. So I don't see any downside.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this and I'm wondering if drywalling is the best solution.
I know.
Here.
I know. Whitley and I agonized over this. He seems very set on this plan.
Well, okay. So if what you're looking for is your blessing, then go with God. Sure. All right? Or go with the other guy if you're into that upside down cross dude who's making this theater in whatever ring of hell he lives in. So I've been watching a lot of Lucifer still. I'm still trying to get through. I'm on season 3, so kind of stuck with too many of those things going through my head. Probably not, my Catholic upbringing's not helping that out too much. But I kind of look at this and I think, wow, what could we do that wasn't drywall that would actually improve the acoustics in the room?
Well, that's one of his questions. So.
Oh, well, is it? Yes. So I guess I'll keep reading. So Kef specifications say that any rear enclosures for the in-ceiling speakers can have a minimum of volume of 0.53 cubic feet. He can theoretically make his backer boxes as wide as the width of his room. So what size and what volume of air do we think is best? Well, we already told you to get the different speakers. So do we have to answer this one too?
Well, I mean, it's still going to come up. If you do go ahead with the full in-ceiling plan, the drywall's installed, you're putting in these Q Acoustics in-ceiling speakers instead, then they're going to, like pretty much every other 6.5-inch in-ceiling speaker, work best with 1 cubic foot of internal volume inside that backer box. So if we take the depth that you have available, assuming you're going to use 1/2-inch thick material, maybe you're going to go for 5/8 or double it up or something, but assuming you're using 1/2-inch thick material to make your backer boxes, if you were to make it, I don't know if these are 16-inch on center. From the little diagram you put in, it
doesn't look like
there's
it.
Nothing to scale. I don't know if it's 16-inch on center or 24-inch on center. If it's 16-inch on center, then what you would end up with is a backer box that goes in between the joists, has the shallow amount of depth that you have, and then would be 3 feet long. That would result in a 1 cubic foot of air volume inside of it. So it's going to be something in that sort of range, which is certainly not the entire width of your room. That
right.
is nothing close to that, but it's going to be about 3 feet long. That's pretty typical inside of if it's just a bay and a wall. which is, only 3.5 inches deep with standard 2x4 construction, then a similar thing. It ends up being about 3 feet tall when it's 16-inch on center.
So he will only have 4 in-ceiling speakers with their backer boxes of 3 feet long. But he wants to put drywall in between the exposed joists for his entire ceiling so that the look is uniform, and so he can install his recessed LED lights. Could he also use all of these ceiling cavities as acoustic treatment somehow? Yes, but you can't put drywall there. That's the problem. Because that's just where I was going with it. Like, say you build your boxes, right?
Yeah.
And you install your speakers, and you use just like little L brackets or whatever to attach them to your joists where you want them to go. Mm-hmm. And then instead of putting drywall up there, you put, a drop tile ceiling or something, or
even just a fabric covering and insulation behind it.
Right, just like and then you fill the entire bay behind the fabric or behind the insulation, with insulation or whatever that you put up there. This would be a great opportunity to do that. But if you put drywall, done killed it all.
And if you don't put the drywall, then it's not going to do anything in terms of soundproofing for the room above. Right. So it's kind of one or the other. I mean, the way that you could have both would be that you do put in the drywall, but you actually put it a little bit higher, like a little bit more of the joist is still left exposed. And maybe you don't do this in the specific locations where the in-ceiling speakers are going to go. But elsewhere, you would put in the drywall a little bit higher, a little bit more, the joist is still exposed, and then on the underside of the joist, you would put like 2-inch insulation there and cover that with fabric or something like that. So in other words, the drywall would be like 2 inches higher than you're proposing, and then there'd be a 2-inch layer of it. Like the insulation needs to be exposed to the theater side. That's the only way it's going to work as acoustic treatment. But if you want any form of soundproofing, that needs to be a solid surface that, insulation is not soundproof. It has to be a solid surface if you want additional soundproofing, so that would be your drywall layer, or at least like mass-loaded vinyl or something. But
I don't love this. I don't love that solution for the reason of, at any point, if he wants to sell this house or wants to do anything different, then suddenly he's got some bays that are drywall to the and the other bays that are the drywall's inset with this acoustic panel on top of it.
I mean,
I say you go one or the other.
I'm still not a big fan of this full stop. I would go for like strip lighting or some kind of other lighting solution that you like the look of better without doing anything to the joists. I would still go for satellite speakers without doing it. But he seems very set on this plan. So I mean, it's basically one or the other. Either you're gonna say, I don't worry too much about the soundproofing side, so therefore I'm just gonna fill the bays with insulation and have an acoustically transparent cover over that insulation for the visual side of it. It's either that or drywall to give you the soundproofing, but then you don't have acoustic treatment unless you put insulation on the underside of the drywall. So it's one or the other.
Yeah. So he mentioned last time that he'd be getting 4 channels of external amplification to power his new Atmos speakers, but all the shelves in his equipment rack are already full, so he's looking for physically small amps that could fit on the shelves in the space behind some of his components. He was looking at a Paramount model, but it costs €900, so that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
He had heard us mention the audio source Amp 100, and that seemed like a good solution, but it appears to be a full width component that would need its own rack shelf. So do they have a physically smaller option, or is there something else that would work in his situation? Get a bigger rack, right?
Or there's oodles of those little Class D 2-channel amps, which for your Atmos speakers.
Yeah, that would be fine too.
I'm not worried about it. So one that I came across, again, I could not find an Amazon Belgium. So I looked at Amazon UK and Amazon France because, I mean, Belgium uses the same electricity. It's 50 hertz and it's the 220 or 230 volt. And they use the same plug as France does, at least from the information I looked up. So over at Amazon UK or Amazon France, there's a company called Fosi Audio, F-O-S-I, Fosi Audio. They got a lovely little Class D. They say 160 watts times 2, but that's into 4 ohms. So it's 80 watts 2x2, which actually matches like perfectly with the power handling capabilities of those Q acoustics in ceiling speakers. And it's like €75. You'd be getting 2 of them, but you're still talking like €150 versus 900. Seems
It's got like
reasonable.
a laptop power supply. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's right. So to me, that's a perfectly reasonable solution. It's very small. You can see from the binding posts if you're looking at the images. Those are standard 5-way binding posts, and it's barely bigger than 4 binding posts side by side.
It's more expensive on the French.
Well, because
side,
one's euro and one's pounds. Pounds are still worth a little bit more than euro.
Did not notice that. Will has a BenQ HD 3550 projector that can do 4K and HDR. He's using it with a Marantz SR6011 receiver, and for his Apple TV 4K, everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first time in many years, he decided to play a movie that he owns on HD DVD.
Yeah. The good old red cases.
Took it out and
oh yes,
blew the dust off of it.
Larger breath than that, I'll bet.
He dug out his old Toshiba A30 player and plugged it in. The video showed up just fine, but there was no audio. Eventually, he resorted to using the optical connection, which worked. But his HD DVD has lossless Dolby True HD audio on it, and the optical connection could only send Dolby Digital 5.1, which is always the case. He looked around online and found some other people saying they had the same problem until they turned deep color off in their displays. So he did that in his BenQ, but no dice. The audio still won't play. After an email with Rob, he checked for the enhanced 4K signal format setting in his Marantz receiver, but that setting didn't exist until one model year later with the 6012. So in the ideas.
Yeah, I thought I had the solution for him when he first wrote this, because I'm like, oh yeah, the Marantzes, they have that 4K signal format setting where you can set it to either standard or enhanced, and they even tell you, hey, if you're having an issue with this set to enhanced, set it to standard, and this is exactly the sort of thing, because that's the difference between the 18 gigabits per second versus the 10.2, and the HDCP 2.2 copy protection versus the HDCP 1.4. So setting it to standard usually solves this issue, but he's one model year too early. I thought it was the SR6010 that had it, and the 6011 got the enhanced versus standard setting, but I was wrong about that. So, the only ideas that I have, and I don't know which one of these would be correct, and I don't know if it'll work at all, but there's the video processing in the SR6011. Now, the first thing you could do is try turning it off entirely. So that is in the video section, the output settings, I believe, where you can choose to just turn video conversion off entirely. Now, that would mean you don't see volume show up on your screen, when you change the volume. The listening mode, you wouldn't see a little thing telling you what listening mode you're in. If you press the info button, it'll go completely black, then bring up the Marantz menu. Then when you go back, it'll go completely black again and bring your image back. So with the video processing off, it doesn't look as slick as that, but that would just mean that the AV receiver is just passing through whatever is being sent to it. It's not touching the video side of things whatsoever, and that might work. But unintuitively, sometimes the issue is that if the AV receiver is not touching the video whatsoever, it's just a straight pass through, and then the HD DVD player in this case is seeing an HDMI 2.0 display on the other end of the signal, which is the case with his BenQ 3550 projector, that if you were to turn the video conversion on in the Marantz and activate its scaler so that it's saying, hey, I'm a 1080p device, but I'm going to upscale this to 4K, that might actually work, because it's all about getting the HD DVD player to think that it's connected to a 1080p display. That's really what's at issue here. That's what the HD DVD player needs to recognize as what it's as the signal that it should be sending. That's what it's attached to. So I don't know if either of those will work, but try them both. If you already have it set to off, try turning the video conversion on and actually setting a target resolution. So that
I'm looking at the resolution of this thing, and that's what came to my mind too, is that it's sending out something weird, because it does True HD.
Oh yeah,
but it looks like it's got 1080i and 1080p 24.
Yep. Yeah, no, the issue is when it comes across HDCP 2.2 and the 18 gigabit per second HDMI 2.0 connection. When it comes across that, it doesn't know what to do because those things didn't exist.
Right,
When an HD DVD player was made, which is why they added this standard versus enhanced setting in the receivers. But since yours doesn't have that, the best I can think of is because I actually think you're probably going to find more success with the video conversion on and forcing your Marantz to do resolution scaling.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll see. Art got a 75-inch TCL 8 series delivered and mounted. It's massive.
He came from a 55, so
Yeah. It's a couple of extra inches there. For the moment, he's still using his 5.1 speaker system with his Integra receiver that cannot do HDMI ARC or audio return channel or pass through 4K signals, so he ran an optical audio cable from the TV to the receiver. All the audio coming out of the TV is stereo, no surround sound. He checked the audio options in the TCL. It could be set to Dolby Digital or DTS, but none of those got surround sound working. Still 2.0. Any ideas? Could be the app.
There is the Roku app. This being TCL, there are settings in the Roku app that do not exist on the television itself. I have a suspect, though, and my suspect is there is the option to turn the TV's internal speakers off entirely, and I think that's what you need to do. Because if they are not turned off entirely, they're only in stereo. And even if you have... So they automatically mute themselves if it detects that you're using the optical output, but it doesn't turn them off. As soon as you turn your AV receiver off, your TV speakers come back on. And I suspect, because it is in the audio settings menu, where you can just turn the TV's internal speakers off entirely. And I believe that's necessary in this case. That should be what does it, because this is optical. It's not like it's detecting something in the way of HDMI and CEC or anything like that. It's just an optical audio connection. So I think that's the thing.
So he wanted to check the settings for his Integra receiver, but they don't show up on the screen anymore. He has the Integra's HDMI output plugged into the HDMI 4, or the ARC input of the TCL. The Integra's menus always showed up on his old TV. What's happening? Did you turn your video processing off?
Well, I mean, he was talking about getting 5.1 audio from the TCL, because of course it has Roku built in and all of its built-in apps with 4K and HDR available and all that. So if you were using the built-in apps of the television, that's your video source. It's not set to HDMI 4. It's not accepting an external video signal. It's providing its own video signal, and then you're just trying to get the audio out of it via the optical connection. So if you press menu on your Integra, that's not going to suddenly show up on your TCL, because the video source that the TCL is tuned to is its own built-in apps. Or in the case of I think he had an external 4K device the last time he emailed, but I was saying, well, since your receiver can't pass through the 4K HDR signal, you'll have to plug it directly into the TCL. Well, that means the TCL is on whatever HDMI input that device is plugged into. Again, you hit menu on your Integra, you're not on HDMI 4.
Right.
So you're not.
The solution is just to change your TV's input, even though you're watching something else.
But I think what he wanted to do is check his Integra to see what audio signal was being sent to it. Now, this is one of the, if you're using HDMI ARC or the optical audio output to send audio from a TV's built-in apps to your AV receiver, there is no way to get the AV receiver's menu onto your screen unless you have a second display and two HDMI outputs on your AV receiver and do it that way. Because, like I say, the video signal is the built-in app. And if you changed it to the HDMI port,
I hadn't thought about that. I had never considered that.
Oh,
that
that bugs me sometimes, because sometimes I'm doing the same. I'm using HDMI ARC, particularly for YouTube, and I'm every so often I'm like, is YouTube doing 5.1 again yet? Because they used to, and then they took it away. And it's like, well, you can't check what the incoming signal is because it's the built-in app, and you don't have an on-screen display from your receiver anymore. That's one of those things, Art, with using the built-in apps. You lose your on-screen display from any other device.
Upgrade your receiver.
Well, that's not going to help.
No, it won't, but at least you'll be able to use your Apple TV 4K or whatever your 4K source was. Yeah. Last one, Joseph. What's our take on using Crown professional amps for home theater? In particular, the XL lowercase I 800 is a Class AB instead of Class D, like a lot of the other models. It's very affordable. There are reviews praising them, reviews saying they can't recommend them, but he values our opinions above most others. Just most.
Yeah, I think
Joe?
actually in his email he said all. I downgraded it because I'm not that conceited.
Doesn't be conceited. Just write down what the man says. Don't make me call him out in front of maybe dozens of people listening to this.
Could be.
So what do we say? Good deal for 200 watts per channel into 8 ohms, or best to avoid them? So the problem with, and this is not really a problem, it's just a thing to consider when you're looking at professional amplifiers, is how they are meant to be used and what they are meant to be used for. So many times when you're looking at professional amplifiers, professional amps are designed to put out massive amounts of power, usually.
Lots and lots of watts.
Lots and lots of watts, and they are meant to be off someplace else. Watts they do it. So
these do still have active fans built into them.
Not all. You can find Crowns and some of the other ones that do not, that have passive cooling. But you have to be very careful to look for them. So you're now introducing, like, I stopped in the middle of the podcast to go figure out what was going on with my power supply, and it's a fan. There's a fan in there that's making this noise. So I had heard it before from my seated position and just thought somebody had left the PlayStation 3 running.
Sure.
Because sometimes it turns itself on because Bluetooth sucks. And that's what I kind of thought it was. So this is, we're talking probably much louder than that. The other thing you have to consider is connections and what kind of connections that they use. So you always want to take a very close look to the back of the amplifier and make sure you know what you're getting yourself into.
On that front, I can confirm these ones are fine. They have regular XLR and RCA inputs, and they do have speak-on outputs, but also regular binding posts. So on that front, I can confirm they'd be fine for a home theater system.
So for those, those are just one of the, I'm just talking about in general with professional amps here, because sometimes you'll look at the back and you realize it only has XLR, or it only has, some sort of, weird proprietary thing I used to know the name, the AEB something. I can't remember
the European one,
the European version or whatever that is, and you're like, what? And I've even gotten professional amps from people that send them to me so I could do testing, and they just have these weird little green things for speaker
the Phoenix
connections.
Connectors, sure.
Yeah, which are a nightmare to work with. But but again, it's a speaker connection. Or once you get it stuck in there, you never touch it again, right? So who cares that it's a nightmare? It saves a bunch of space and makes things cheaper, which is what they were going for with these things. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at professional amps, you have to shop extra careful. Like you can go to Monoprice, Monolith amps. You can go to Emotiva, the ATI, Outlaw Audio. You look at their amp and say, I'll take this one. That's it. That's what you have to do. This is the number of watts this is the size. This looks good. It's pretty. Has the number of channels I want. Boom, I'm good. With professional amps, you got to be a lot more careful.
Yeah, with these ones specifically. In all likelihood, if you were to get these, other than potentially hearing the fan noise, if these are going to be in a rack outside your room or even just in a equipment cubby with a door closed or something like that, I'm not too worried about that. You're not going to be drawing a ton of power, nothing close to the amount of wattage that these things could put out in your home theater setting. So I'm not worried about the heat. I'm not worried about the fans that much. If they're going to be completely exposed and right in front of you and only 8 feet away or something like that, then you might hear the fans and you wouldn't want them for that reason alone. But the major thing is they have unusually high gain, as in you need a very low amount of voltage to get them to their full power. So you gotta be a touch careful with that. You might need to turn their trim levels way down. And the other side of it is they have not fantastic distortion and signal to noise and noise floor figures. These are meant to play PA speakers really, really, really loud. That's what they're meant to do. In a situation
horn-loaded, like compression tweeter
Yeah.
speakers,
where you're not
They're
worried about the
massive.
noise floor because you're blasting music in a DJ situation. And yeah, that's what they're for. So with a low level signal, like this is the type of thing you could connect your laptop to it and blast some music through some PA speakers. That's what it's really intended for. So if what you're after is super duper low noise floor because you've treated your room, you've soundproofed it, you've got a super quiet area, but you don't want to hear the fan, you don't want there to be a noise floor, you don't want the distortion figures to be anything less than stellar. Like it doesn't have those things. That's why it's like $200 for a whole pile of watts. I got no problem with this thing existing. It's just I'm not sure a lot depends, basically. If you have some inefficient speakers with a preamp that has low voltage from its pre-outs, and you're probably going to turn the trim levels down, and these things are going to be far enough away or outside of the room where the active fans aren't going to be a problem, they will function perfectly fine, and they will play your speakers crazy, crazy loud.
You put resistors on your cables.
You can do that too, yeah. But it's
inline resistor.
When there's something like Outlaw out there. Now, Outlaw is not going to give you the same channel count for the same low price. But if you want like 5 channels, you'd end up getting 3 of these things, $200 a piece. That's $600. Outlaw's 7 or 5 channel amplifier is $750, but it's got a really, really low noise floor and really, really low distortion and the type of gain structure that a normal home theater receiver or pre-pro is going to be putting out in terms of voltage. Like it's not that far away in terms of price. So
right.
Yeah, that's my take, Joseph. If you got them and loved them and you're like, hey, man, I got a pile of watts for a very low amount of money, I'm like, yeah, they will function absolutely fine. I'm not worried about the connections or, compatibility or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just do Theo real quick. I know
it's the last one.
Over 2 hours, but I'm punchy
and it's not a
enough that I
super
don't
long
care.
question, so.
That's the only reason why this is making it in there, Theo. Theo, since Dolby Atmos is an object-based audio format, will it make use of front wide speakers if you have them? Depends on your receiver, and mostly the answer is no.
So the answer is it can. So we have to distinguish. You've got actual Dolby Atmos, then you've got the Dolby Surround Up Mixer, which is for any type of signal that is not Dolby Atmos. And then on the DTS side, you have DTS X, which is akin to Dolby Atmos, and you have the DTS Neural X Up Mixer, which can be applied to any signal that is not DTS X. So Dolby Atmos uses objects, but it can also use channels. And when it comes to the floor level speakers, we're seeing a lot of soundtracks, mixes that are still using channels primarily and not using a lot of objects in the floor level. So if objects are not being used in the floor level, your front wide speakers will never make a peep with actual Dolby Atmos. The only way they can make a peep is if objects are used in the floor level and there are some coordinates attached to some of those objects that position them where front wide speakers are, right? If the only objects that are ever used are all behind you, then you're not going to have anything coming out of your front wides. So it's very iffy. It's possible. It's entirely possible for your front wide speakers to get used with Dolby Atmos, but only if there's objects and those objects have coordinates that are positioned where front wide speakers would be. The Dolby Surround Up Mixer can never use front wides, full stop. That's the end of the story. Front wide speakers will always be dead silent with the Dolby Surround Up Mixer. DTS X is the same situation as Dolby Atmos. It would have to be objects in the mix, and they would have to have coordinates where your front wide speakers are. DTS Neural X is the most likely way of making your front wide speakers make some sounds, because it just says, hey, is there a sound that is coming partially out of a front speaker and partially out of a surround speaker? Well, if that's the case, a front wide should be making those sounds instead, and the DTS Neural X Up Mixer will put sounds into the front wides. So that's all of it. That covers it.
Okay. Let's see. I was going to say, who do we have left, Rob?
We don't.
That's
Look at
usually
that.
what I say when I scroll up, but I just did that instead. All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week again. Joseph, for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and giving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 122 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yes, indeed. Joseph, thank you so much for the PayPal donation. It's really appreciated. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, thank you very much to our 122 patrons over there.
I also want to thank Jay for suggesting some horror movies to me, as well as the notes of gratitude from Chris and Terry.
For sure. Jay, that was a very nice note, and thank you for thinking of us. And Chris and Terry do appreciate those notes of gratitude. Thank you to everyone who continues to listen, continues to send in your questions to question@avrant.com. That's our email address. That's the way to get your question onto the podcast. Thank you, everyone, for keeping this community going and giving Tom and I something to do every week.
Yes. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.